I am Bethany Autumn, and this is the Bear All podcast. Today, episode 4, I am going to be talking a little bit about relationships, sex, love, and trauma, and sort of how all of those things work in together. And I really just wanted to talk on this topic because it's something currently that, like, in my life, it really has affected me the last couple of years, trying to find deep, meaningful relationships with people and not even just um, partnership relationships, like a boyfriend, girlfriend type thing, but even when it just comes to basic friendships. And I know I've touched base on this a lot. So, in the past few years, I feel like I've really struggled with um, the self identity topic that I've sort of talked about, learning to love yourself, being happy, and healing. And I truly feel like a lot of issues that people have in relationships end up stemming from childhood traumas. And I I feel like it took me a long time to learn how to love somebody properly after years of being in a toxic marriage where I was being groomed and being molded into this person that person wanted me to be. And I feel like it was really, really difficult for me to find myself and find what love meant to me after so many years of just having a very twisted sense of love and self worth. And, you know, I've made so many mistakes, but I think something that, a lot of us say, oh, well, you learn from your mistakes. That is so true. We really do learn from our mistakes. And I think that sometimes we really have to take into consideration, like, oh, am I making the same mistakes over and over and over again? Because if I am, then you're just you're not learning from them. You need to like take it, learn from it, and then be like, okay, how can I make this better? And how can I truly learn? And I feel like so many of the relationships that I've gotten into have been almost like me finding slightly different things in a person, but then still having the same difficulties. And a lot of the times it's been like communication, being open, learning to heal and develop, and, you know, just finding finding a partner that you're truly compatible with. It's something that I still struggle with till this day, but I'm working on it. Even the current relationship that I'm in right now, I've really had to put in a lot of hard work, and so has my partner. And I think that being able to find that middle ground that both of you can stand on and just be like, hey, like I just need to be heard and I need to be seen. These are my love languages. And while your love languages might be different, we need to be able to learn so we can really, really make it successful. Um, I I've briefly mentioned in previous episodes that I've had some really difficult childhood traumas, and I'm not talking about the traumas from my marriage, which were my young adult years, but I'm talking about like deep, deep into my childhood. Um, when I was around the age of 6, um, I had my first sexual experience. It was not my choice. I um, had an older foster kid at the time that was living with us. Did some things with me that I didn't really know at the time what they were. I mean, no 6-year-old should know any of those things. But it really created a messed up idea in my mind about what sex and love kind of meant. And I think that that's something like till this day, it's very much affected me. I mean, that's why I've been in therapy since I was 7, was trying to process the things that had happened to me and um, learning from that experience that it wasn't my fault. And I think that that's something that being that young and having something like that happen to me really, like, really just like psychologically messed me up. And, I had severe depression, anxiety, and PTSD. from the whole situation. You know, it was a complete out of body experience. I go into details in my memoir about it, and it's definitely not an easy topic to talk about, which is why I'm not going to go into details. Um, but it's something that unfortunately so many young women and also men experience at that very delicate developmental age. I mean, when you're that young, it really alters chemicals in your brain. Um, and it's something that till this day in relationships has created a significant block and hardship where I definitely started to, and I mentioned this in my past episode, where I started to almost use sex as like a drug of sorts and a coping mechanism because it became something that didn't seem special or important. And it just seemed like something that I could do to sort of stop thinking about the things that were hurting me. And that in retrospect ended up traumatizing me more. And it's hard to talk about this topic. Um, but it's something that needs to be talked about because not enough people talk about it. And I feel like there's so many people that are hurting from sexual abuse, um, whether it's at a really young age, some even younger than mine. Unfortunately, it's very disturbing. It's uncomfortable to think about. And I think that's why we've sort of created this stigma of not talking about it because it makes people uncomfortable. But guess what? The people who experienced it are the ones who are in true discomfort because they had to experience something so traumatizing that it altered their path in life, that it altered who they were. I mean, would I be the person I am right now if that didn't happen to me? I don't know. I'm never going to know. But it always like sucks when people are like, "Oh, all the struggles and difficult things in your life led you to become the person that you are now." And I'm like, "Yes, while that is a true statement, it's also sometimes nice to just hear that like that was fucked up. That's not okay." I was actually talking to my current partner about this and an experience that he had. And I'm not going to go into his experience, but he referenced this thing that a friend had said to him where so many people kept trying to just say, "Oh, well, maybe it was God's plan, or maybe the universe needed this thing to happen, or, you know, that's just the way of life," or something like that. Like people try to put these things to make it seem like it's less of a difficulty or a pain. But I think he said that one of his friends came up to him about a situation that had happened and just said, "It's unfair. It's not okay. That's so fucked up that this happened." And I think that there were so many times, like, I mean, when all of this stuff happened, I was such a child that I didn't even really process or understand anything that had happened. Um, but as an adult, when I've opened up to people about it, it it's not comforting to hear, "Oh, that's so unfair," or "That sucks that that really happened," or, you know, maybe it's helping you become the person that you are today. It's just like, no, I want to be able to help create a narrative around this type of topic that when it's brought up, people can say, "Yo, that's fucked up that that happened to you." And we need to be able to create a better world where things like this aren't happening normally and regularly, and that we're making it like this thing where it's like the victims of these predators aren't allowed to come out openly and say this happened to me, and then having them be like, "Oh, well, that sucks, but like let's move past it. Let's stop thinking about the past." Well, guess what? It's easy for somebody to say that when that wasn't their past. And if they are somebody who has had a traumatic past and they move on from that, they're usually somebody who's living in their own world that they've created, They haven't healed properly. And most of the time, unfortunately, I've seen people who use excessive amounts of drugs, alcohol, and sex to cover up their pain. Because I was that kind of person where I was using things in an incorrect way to cover up and mask the pain of deep seated childhood traumas that I hadn't processed for so long. I mean, I pushed them off and I pushed them off, and it made me really uncomfortable as a young teenager to be able to be like, oh my God, like I don't know how to interact with my peers because in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, like, what if somebody tries to do this to me again and I don't want it? Or all of these things, like, and I was raised in a church and in a community where we were told, like, you need to wait to have sex or perform sexual acts until you're married. And then, so I always felt like guilty, like I was this tainted object of, you know, whatever. I felt like I was like, well, if I'm not, like in my mind, I always thought it was like a legal thing. Like I have to wait until I'm married to do this. And then I was just like, well, but what if it's already happened to me? Why do, like, that sacredness of it is gone. And I think from like I started losing my faith in religion and the church at a very young age. Um Kind of blocked all of that stuff out for a while. Started getting angry about it again when I was a preteen, and then once I started in high school becoming sexually active again is when that really like it started to hit me all over again, and I started realizing like, oh my God, okay, like I've experienced some of these things before, and it's really it it started to make me uncomfortable. It started to make me confused. It started to make me use sex in an inappropriate way where I was just truly abusing it because it was like pleasurable, but like in a way where it made me not hurt from the emotions that I was feeling. Um, I also was unfortunately a teenager who liked to self inflict some types of injury, whether it was like um, cutting or, punching a wall or finding other ways to inflict pain on myself because it was a way to escape the world. I'm not proud of that. It makes me really sad that that's where I was at that point in my life. But it truly made me this perfect victim that was able to be now, taken and molded by this older man because he looked at me and realized, wow, this person's so broken. This person's so hurt. And they're so highly sexual that I could easily take advantage of this situation. And that kind of really just messed up my reality of having healthy relationships. I didn't have a successful high school boyfriend relationship at all. Anything that I had was very messy, very, they didn't care about me. I was literally just a sexual object. I didn't have anything that ever felt special when I was in high school. Um, and the one time I did, it, it didn't last long, and he ended things and it broke my heart. And then it just sent me on this crazy downward spiral where I just started misbehaving and becoming a little bit of a delinquent, sex crazed teenager. And then eventually falling into the arms of my, at that time, music teacher because he just, made everything seem like it was going to be okay. And so I think that having sexual trauma at a really young age really, really distorts your perception of love and what sex is supposed to mean. And don't get me wrong, I think that like as young adults, we all kind of like, maybe not all of us, I think, but for people who are definitely more sexually experimental, I think that, we get into these, sort of, we like to call it the hoe phase. But I think that it's like a very sexual, adventurous time where you can go out and sort of explore your body. And like, I always knew I was bisexual. So like, I was like, wow, I want to go and explore all these different types of things and feel all these different types of things and see what I like and see what I don't like because I've been married before and I don't want to be stuck in a relationship again with somebody that I'm not thoroughly enjoying the way that they sexually enjoy stuff. So it gave me a very like experimental kick a couple of times in my life as a young adult. And I think that also, you know, all of that stuff kind of leads to severe anxiety and depression, which I've already had for a very I've had since I was a child. So being an adult going through all of these crazy heightened things, it really started to make me feel really depressed and anxious in more extreme ways than before, and having, alcohol and certain drugs involved, which I've never done any really hard drugs at all, but I will consider marijuana a drug. And, I was using alcohol and sex as a way to really drown stuff out. And I was also smoking a lot because it just kind of helped numb and make me feel relaxed. And um, it, it just, I started to like live in this bubble that I had created. Um, I also was really big into like my self image because I felt like I needed to be and look a certain way for people to like me. I think we all do that to a certain extent, especially with social media these days. But in high school, I was always compared to my older sister, and I was always told that, I would have guys come up to me and be like, "Oh, well, talk to me when you look hotter like your sister," or this or that. So for me, it was always like this. It created this sense of that I wasn't beautiful, and because I was a little dorky and weird and stuff, that I wasn't lovable or likable. And um, I've struggled with body dysmorphia for a long time. And I think that when I have sex with people and they make me feel good, that it was like a way to like validate the fact that I look a certain way. And that's really been something that like in the last year that I've really tried to focus with healing myself on, is that, it's okay if you gain a few pounds. It's okay if you get a little pudge around your stomach, especially like that time of the month when you're bloated, or if you just ate a ton of food. Like, it's okay to look this way. It's okay to not always have to have the perfect looking body, the perfect looking hair and makeup all the time. It's so fucking exhausting. And it's just draining, and it just falls back into that cycle of me not liking myself or me not feeling good enough, and then me going out and craving validations from people who don't matter and don't care about me and don't love me and don't like they don't care if I wake up the next day. It's like, why am I wasting my time? And I think that that's something that I constantly try to tell myself moving forward, is don't do things that are a waste of time. Do things that are going to help your future in one way or another. Not even just like, financially, but like in my mental health. I've been on such a long journey of healing that it's so easy to fall back into old patterns. Like trying to be able to keep yourself in the correct lane of this highway of life when you're spiraling out of control constantly because there's triggers and there's things that make you feel like less of yourself. I think it's so important to look at your journey and say, well, where do I want to go? And I know I mentioned this before, like when I had originally started writing my book, um, I realized that it was a journey that I wasn't quite ready to take yet. It was something that I wanted to pursue, but I wanted to take some little side roads of experimentation and just sort of these weird self validations, and just being like, I just want to make sure of this. I'm not 100% sure, but I want to make sure of this before I just dive deep into healing. And it was truly so hard because I wanted to heal so bad because I wanted to have a really strong and healthy relationship with a partner. Um, you know, there's, um, there's always been that urge, from a young age to hopefully one day maybe have kids, maybe get married again for me. And I realized that that was not something I was ever prepared to do or okay to do without being fully healed. And I was really struggling with trying to do any of that because I was like, oh my God, I'm still such a mess. I'm still all over the place. I still don't know what I quite want in life yet. So I feel like I need to go off and experience things. And and by experience things, I'm going to jump a little deeper into that because, I actually have a really great friend who she listens into my podcast, and she says that she loves the things that I have to say, and she's really connecting a lot with them. And um, I wanted to just briefly touch on the topic of like polyamory and or open relationships, or just even the basic topic of experimental sexual um, uh, activities. So a few years ago, after coming out of a kind of slightly long term relationship that didn't end the way I wanted it to, I really tried to experiment more with my sexuality. And this was around the same time that I originally started writing the book. And it was at the same time that I had moved to my apartment and lived on my own. So it was the first time I had ever really had independence. And I was like, oh, I just want to find out more about myself. And I really just want to experiment and kind of go wild. And I tried to dabble in polyamory. Unfortunately, I never really was able to find multiple partners at the same time that wanted to have a successful relationship like that. So I ended up diving into having threesomes and experimenting, with couples and different stuff like that because it was something that kind of interested me. And it was because I was seriously not looking for a relationship. I was looking for sexual exploration. I just really wanted to go off on an adventure, try some things, see how it felt, and then maybe figure out what I wanted to do from there. And I ended up hurting myself a lot. I also ended up hurting some people along the way who were like, "Hey, like I really want to try this thing with you." And I was just like, I'm not in a place right now in my life to be in a monogamous, healthy relationship. I know I'm not. I would love to be one day, but that is currently not who I am. And I always stuck to that. And I always tried to be very honest about who I was at that time. And unfortunately, it got messy, and it got in the way of me healing. And I realized shortly after that, I did all of that crazy stuff for like about a year and realized I can't continue this. It's too much for me. I don't like being scared of people sleeping around and STDs and like that type of stuff really scared me. And I got really lucky that I never had to deal with any of that type of stuff. But for people out there in the poly community or in the open relationship community, it's definitely something that you really have to take into account, that it's a very specific lifestyle of living. And I really don't judge anybody for any way that they want to live their life. As long as you and your partner are happy and safe and everyone's communicating, it's fine. But it does, especially like as a single woman out there, it really started to become this thing that was like, would get scary at times or uncomfortable in the community we like to call single attractive women, unicorns. And it was like living a unicorn's life got to be frightening because I was really scared that I was going to get really traumatized and hurt. And there were experiences that I had that I definitely um wish I didn't have. And unfortunately, I think that it's just something that kind of happens when you're trying to experiment with this kind of stuff after having a lifehood of like a lifetime of sexual traumas. Like having something happen to me at such a young age set this weird precedence for the rest of my life. And then being in a very mentally and sexually abusive marriage. Like I was with that man for 7 years. That was 7 years of my life that I was just with one person who did a lot of really messed up things to me sexually that really altered my mind and my thinking and my sexual behaviors. And I think that like it's something that should be more widely accepted when talking about having current relationships with current partners. Like I that's something that I have to really talk to my partner about and be like, you need to understand these things that I've been through and my traumas and my triggers, so that way when I freak out when in the middle of us trying to become intimate, you understand that like, okay, it's not me, that like you're triggered, let's stop, let's reevaluate this. And it's so good to feel heard and to feel safe and to feel validated, because it's like it's not, for me it's not even just mentally anymore the way these things have affected me, because now as an adult who's healing, I've had so many issues with just having basic intercourse. Unfortunately, I have extreme pain, and it's something that I've had to go see specialists for to try to figure out what's exactly wrong. And well, I'm not going to dive deep into exactly what's wrong with me. It's more of like they pretty much were just kind of like, all right, well, there's this issue, but it's also mental. Like your body is telling you you don't feel safe. And I think I was living in a state of chaos for so long that I didn't even when things hurt, I didn't stop because I was so numb. And now that I have finally gotten to a healing point, my body has physically told me multiple times, you physically are, you can't do this anymore. And I will, it just shuts down. And it's been really, really difficult. And it's been, this has all been such an interesting healing journey that I'm really just trying to heal from. It's a healing journey I'm trying to heal from. That doesn't really make sense. This has all been such an interesting healing journey that I've tried to learn and process things. And, you know, thank God for the years of therapy that I've had. I love being able to connect with my therapist and talk about these things. And she's known me since I was 15. So it's great for her to like sort of reiterate like all these things throughout my life and be like, yeah, when you were this age, this is what you thought. And when you were this age, this is what you thought. And just to sort of go back over the timeline with her sometimes and realize truly how far I've come. And I'm so, so proud of myself, because nobody should ever have to experience the things in life that unfortunately a lot of us have. And I I I want everybody to learn to heal so they stop hurting others, because I think that that was something that I've definitely done in my past years, is that I was so unhealed and so broken and so hurt and had such a fucked up reality of how my sex life should be, that I ended up hurting other people along the way that I never meant to hurt. And just because you're open and honest about what you want doesn't mean that you're not gonna hurt people, cuz people are gonna accept things and understand things differently from the way that you explain them to them, and sometimes they're going to catch feelings regardless of you saying I don't want this, and you end up hurting people, and it really sucks. And I never like to be a villain in somebody's story, as I'm sure the rest of you don't like it, but unfortunately we are. And unfortunately, it was a part of our story and learning to heal. And it's not like I wanted to be a villain. You know, I feel like I was almost created and turned into that person because of the abuse that I had endured in my marriage. And it was so hard for me for so long to try to explain it to people without having to go into the gruesome details of what happened, because physical abuse, you can see the bruises. You have the records of the broken bones and the bloody nose and the black eye. But with mental and sexual abuse, like it where it becomes like more of like this psychological abuse, you really can't just like go up to somebody and say, "Oh, well, I was hurt." And it's like, "Well, how?" And it's an uncomfortable topic to talk about. "Oh, well, I was hurt because, for most of my first sexual experiences I ever had with that man, I was a 17-year-old who would just get extremely drunk and high and do a lot of weird BDSM type stuff that I had never experienced before. And it altered my mind. And it made me feel like the only time that I was supposed to really have any type of sexual intercourse was when I was just really high and drunk and being treated like I was an animal. Um, and I go into more of this in detail in my book. Um, because even just trying to think of it now, I don't want to talk about it in detail. And but it's like when you've been that fucked up and your sense of reality is so different from a more healthy person's sense of reality, it's really, really hard to connect. Like there would be times where I would, looking back on it now, where I would get really like high or drunk, um, mostly drunk. And I would be in social situations with my peers and I would say really, really like outlandish, inappropriate things. And I would make gestures or different things to people and make people uncomfortable. And it took me a long time to realize that I was actually the person being wrong, but I didn't know that that was wrong because I had become so normal to me that when other people didn't find my advances like nice or sexy or funny, I was like offended, because I had been trained to be such a sexual object that I would start behaving that way. And then I would get angry that people would treat me like a sexual object when I was around them sober. Like I would do things inappropriately drunk and then I would be upset about it when I was sober. Like, well, why did this happen? And then I was just like realizing that I was like, oh, like I'm just blacking out and forgetting the way I behaved and I'm behaving inappropriately or in a manner that's making weird, creepy older men or other people think that I'm now suddenly this person that can be taken advantage of. And then I'm making really bad decisions and doing things that I'm like, why am I doing this? And I started hating myself and getting really upset. And then I finally learned to start taking control of it and realizing that I want to use my sexuality in the way that I want to. And I want to start setting boundaries and limits with people. And then people start to not like you because now you're somebody who sets boundaries and limits and calls people out on their bullshit or and then it just starts to get weird and uncomfortable and I think that that's something that has just been a reoccurring theme in my entire life is that it's just been this weird and uncomfortable life that it's been really difficult for me to process and having being younger and be growing up and being put on all these medications because oh well you have ADHD because you can't pay attention in school or you can't do this or you can't do that. It's like no, I just can't process being around anybody or anything right now because I'm uncomfortable sitting next to boys in class because what if one of them tries to touch me or I'm uncomfortable trying to verbalize the things that I want because I have these weird thoughts and images spinning around in my mind of this weird out of body experience that I had watching myself being hurt and having these things happen to me. And then, my dad left and then I didn't have him around. So then I was like, well, I'm just, no men in my life love me. And it was just like constantly this reoccurring theme of me just being so uncomfortable with my own body and with me as a person. And I felt like I was weird and awkward and didn't deserve to be loved. And it's taken so long And there are still days where I have these days where I really don't feel like I'm enough. And I have to really, really remind myself. And that's part of the reason why I even did this podcast, because for all I care of anybody out there watching, like I hope I'm inspiring people, but at the end of the day, this is for me. This is so that way when I'm having rough days, I can watch this stuff and be like, okay, you're so strong. You've changed. You've done so much. It's okay. And these are difficult topics to talk about, and then put them out for strangers or people who know me but don't know me to see. And I'm being very, very, very vulnerable in all of this. And I I think it's the strongest thing that I could ever do, and I'm so proud of myself. But I'm really, really sad that I've had to go through the things that I've had to go through. And I'm really sad that I know that I am not the only one who has gone through things like this, some even worse. And I just, I want to. I want to do whatever I can do to help heal the world, because I feel like it's unfortunately still so broken at the core. We try to fix things with, you know, there's so many ways that we try to fix the world. Oh, let's just, slap some mascara on it and suddenly all your problems are gone. Um, Not that I'm shitting on makeup, because I love makeup. I love it. It's a form of self-expression. But I think that so many times we are trying to fix. It's kind of like when I've talked about, and like in my book, I've talked about like the medication that I was given as a young child to fix my ADHD, even though I didn't have ADHD. I had anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and now later in life has been um, uh, diagnosed as having a borderline personality disorder, which is not the same as a person like it's not the same as multi-personality disorder. You feel free to look it up. It's very interesting, and there's a lot of things that I can relate to that. Um, but like sort of having these moments where like I'm not processing things properly, or like having these weird blackouts and not really remembering the things that I've said or done, because I'm so like overwhelmed, and there's just so much going on that it's really, really difficult. And I think that like what I was trying to say is like giving somebody medicine to cure a symptom is not as good as going and digging deep to the root cause of the problem and being like, okay, this is what happened to you. Let's fix this. And I think that especially with like generational trauma, I think that there's so many times that like the trauma of our parents got passed down to our parents. And then our parents were abused or treated a certain way because of their generational traumas. And then that got sent down to us, where our parents abused us in different ways, or we were put in situations where we were abused, or different things like that. And it's just like these generational traumas where it's like I really, really, really hope, and unfortunately this isn't going to happen overnight. This might not even ever happen. But I think that if enough people can start to learn that we have to stop we have to stop the problem at the core. Like if your kid tells you that so and so gives them the creeps or the wiggles and they make them uncomfortable, don't let that person in your house. Don't expect your child to stay alone with that person and let them babysit them or do this or do that. Listen to your children. They're not just children that are making stuff up. They're valid concerns. And that's not just speaking from my own specific things, but other things that I've heard from people. It's like, stop the trauma at the source. Listen to your kids. Understand that when maybe your child is being a little bit like, and this is specifically from like my experiences, it's like there were times that like as a young unruly teenager, I would get angry and throw a fit and would neglect to do a chore. And then I would get severely punished for not doing that chore. And it was like, okay, well, that's not really fair, because the reason that I'm having this outburst is because of a trauma or something that traumatized me, that's reoccurring, and it's being brought back up, and it's making me feel a certain way. And unfortunately, I think that we're so sometimes quick to discipline children without realizing exactly what it's about or why it's happening. Like there's very different circumstances, and that's like a whole other topic that I really don't have time to go into today. But I just I, I think for me it's just like really having my dad leave at a young age, having the sexual trauma that I endured, being groomed, and having everything happened in the relationship in my marriage. You know, he was 15 years older than me. So after that ended, it was easy to fall back into the arms of older men, even older than him. And it was because I truly felt like I didn't deserve to have somebody who was younger and sort of more of my peer, because I had had so many weird, wild, crazy things happen to me and been treated in such a specific way that I kept falling back into things that felt normal, because those things that had become so normal, I started to feel comfortable, even though they were the most uncomfortable things that I had experienced. And I just kept finding broken men and people that ended up hurting me in very, very different ways, whether it was more sexual trauma or just more, emotional neglect, not feeling like they were truly a partner, and more of just like somebody that I was caring for, or they were caring for me, or whatever the case may be. And I just realized that along this journey, I was like, I'm just so angry that I'm not learning to love myself and find myself. And that's why I think moving here and living here alone with my cat has been the most healing experience in my life, because I've been able to be like, what does Bethany need? Can Bethany take a break from all this chaotic craziness? And it's, you know, for me, it was a lot about learning to properly starting to communicate with people and setting boundaries. Like, now that I live on my own, it's easier to set boundaries because that person isn't in my space. So now when I go out on dates and I'm experiencing things with people for the first time, I'm able to start setting boundaries. And when they don't really respect those boundaries, it's easy because I can just jump in my car and leave. Or if they're here, I could just say like, hey, it's time for you to get out of here. And I think that that's something that was so valuable, was being able to like finally set those boundaries because I had my own space. And I think that like being in an environment where you have like roommates, or you're living with your partner, or even if you still live with your family, boundaries are really something that are hard to set and navigate, because you're really within other people's space and they're within your space. And that's just something that's just really, really hard to navigate. And everybody's situation is very different. And, I got very lucky where at the time I was making enough money that I finally could afford to qualify for an apartment on my own. I had never been able to do that. And mind you, I was 27. It took me until I was 27 to be able to like, I want to try to live on my own. I can afford to do it right now. I'm going to do it. And I've had a lot of financial struggle since then. So it's been really, really hard to keep this all. That's also been something that's really hard to navigate. But now that I'm not dealing with the relationship trauma as much, I'm able to focus more on that. And that's why when like I've had relationships that don't really fit my lifestyle, it's easy for me to shut them down, cut them off, and end it, because I'm just like, I've got more important things to deal with than trying to heal a broken man. Like if you are somebody who really needs a lot of therapy and needs a lot of healing, I'm very quick to cut it off, because I'm just like, I have so much more that I need to work on and healing and being able to focus on surviving and having the things that I love. And that's truly become my journey, is just being able to like, I want to be able to make it by on my own. That's become something that's so important to me now. And I think sometimes we become so complacent and we become so codependent in our partners that it's really, really hard to figure out how to be the best version of yourself when you're constantly worried about somebody else. And that's something that I've really made sure to set boundaries in my new relationship where I'm just like, hey, like, these are the things I want. These are the things I need. I still need my independence. I still need this. And, and I need to know the things that you want. And like, eventually, if I get to a point where I'm comfortable, like, of course, I think the end goal for a lot of people is to like buy a house and get married and have kids. And, I don't know if that's a journey that I'm going to take again. I never got to the kids point part, but I did get married, buy a house. And, if that's something that I ever, like, if that's a path I ever go down again, I want to make sure that I'm 100% sure of it and that my partner and I are on a level that we can communicate and really know that that's what we want. So that's, you know, healthy boundaries, great communication, awareness for each other is something that's so important in relationships with me moving forward. And I think that that's so important to so many people. And I think that not enough people, we live in this culture nowadays where it's just like hookup culture and, not really communicating properly and people getting hurt and jumping around from relationship to relationship without having very specific boundaries. And that's where even like trying to experiment in the poly world and the non-monogamous world got me a little bit messy because I would try to set boundaries, but then when you're in that world, unfortunately, what I've seen is you're dating a lot of people who are also really unhealthy and don't know how to set boundaries or communicate. And then things get messy, people get jealous, things get stupid, and it's just unfortunate for everybody involved. So, and I'm not saying that that's everybody's experience. I think that there are poly communities or non-monogamous communities of people who really know that that's what they want and that's what they want to do, and they've been part of it for a long time where they're able. And any podcast that I've ever listened to on polyamorous and non-monogamous relationships have all been about being like, communication is so important. It's the key thing to make stuff like that work. And if you're not willing to just communicate basically, then you're never going to make anything like that work. So, I just wanted to wrap this up by just saying that, like, no matter what types of traumas, you've gone through in your life, you can heal. It's not easy. I mean, I'm saying this directly from my experience. It is not easy. This is really hard. This is something that I struggle with constantly. These are things that are in the back of my mind always. Unfortunately, they are. I can't just forget about them. Think about people with these kinds of traumas. Think about them as like a victim of like being in a car accident and having like severe burns and cuts on their body that you can see. So you like say, okay, I can visualize that. I can visualize somebody who's been physically injured and has the scars to prove it. But like, really, when you see somebody that's hurting, or you see somebody who's like, maybe you can't even tell that they're hurting, but you can tell that their behavior is a little off and they're chaotic, and maybe they're like they're quick to be aggressive, or they're quick to throw a punch, or they're really, really quiet and don't like to interact. There are certain signals that you can tell from people, and you can be like, that person is dealing with some deep stuff. And just understand that when you see that and you notice that, recognize that that's a person who probably has a lot of internal mental scars. And there are so many people that I know who have gone through similar experiences that they don't want to talk about them openly the way that I do. And I completely respect that. But they also have these things that they're doing to heal. I'm healing by doing this. Other people heal through art, through music, through diving into work and making their career a way to heal. And, also seeking therapy. A lot of the people who I know who have gone through severe traumas like me, that are truly like healed individuals that are continuing to heal, are people who have sought out professional help and then really dove into their passions and tried to find the things in life that make them the happiest. So, you know, my little homework for all of you guys is, if you're somebody who's hurting and you know that you need to continue to heal, but you're struggling to figure out where to start, find something that you love to do and use that as an outlet. And also, don't be afraid to go and seek some professional help. I know it's really hard these days, like in this time, especially since the pandemic, to really find like good mental health. But don't give up, because if you give up, you're quitting. And we don't want to quit. We want to continue. So call call all the places in your area, see who accepts your insurance, try to find the right therapist. It might take you a couple of times, but finding the right therapist is like trying to find the right relationship. You need to find the one that fits you the best. And I'm lucky that I've had the same one since I was 15, but you can find it. You just need to not give up. And I want to see you heal, and I want you guys to continue to be on this journey of healing with me. And I'm really looking forward to the next episode. Um, and I'm going to be having my first guest on, my sister Christina. She's an assistant professor of psychology, and she's going to be coming on my podcast, and we're going to be talking a lot about some of the things that I briefly touched base on in this episode. I really hope that you guys all have an amazing day. Again, I am Bethany Autumn with the Bear All podcast, and have a great day, guys. Bye.